Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. I'm Sara Jane. Welcome to Gift of Healing TV. I am delighted to be joined by, now I'm going to say Olga's first name and she's going to say her surname for us. So Olga, thank you for joining me.
Chernyavska.
Chernyavska. I was nearly there with what I was thinking. Thank you for joining us. And Olga's going to be sharing with us supporting the well-being of helpers and high achievers. But I'm going to start by reading her bio to you. Olga is a therapist and supervisor with a holistic approach to healing, integrating mind-centered, body-centered, and mind-body therapies. Her practice supports individuals on their journey towards emotional well-being by addressing the biological, psychological, social, and spiritual aspects of health. With over 12 years of experience, Olga has helped many individuals struggling with stress, anxiety, and trauma improve both their personal and professional lives. She guides clients in breaking free from cycles of overwhelm and self-criticism, helping them find lasting peace and confidence without sacrificing their goals. Olga, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure there will be an awful lot of information here that can support people. But to start with, just share a little bit about yourself and how you come to do what you do.
Well, I think I started thinking about people who maybe didn't have enough support in their lives when I was about a teenager. I think around that time, I think my family was going through difficult times, which had lots of different risks and concerns and worries. And around that time, finally, I think when things settled down, I thought to myself, we managed to pull together because we're quite a good, strong family and we have a good network together around us. But how does it happen for people maybe who don't have that? And yes, later on, I decided to study psychology. And during that time, I realized that our upbringing is quite important to us. And so it has different aspects to it that we need to consider in life and in therapy when I'm working with people. So I think that's where the journey began for me. And that's how I thought, how is it to work with people? And I trained as an integrative counselor first. And whilst I was in social services, I did my MA in social work. So that has been interesting as well, because I worked with adults who had various, usually physical health difficulties, but of course, mental health came with that, because when people are physically unwell, it's very difficult for them to manage on psychological level as well. And then, yes, I thought, there is still something missing in me feeling as a therapist completely, fully in the way that I wanted to. So I've done my final training, which focused on trauma and body and how our body reacts to trauma and what happens to our body as we grow older. And how the traumas surface, sometimes childhood ones. And the childhood ones are harder or more difficult to work with. It's harder and more difficult for people to live with and deal with it and address it. And in therapy, it can be tricky, difficult to work with because lots of different things come up. Because people might come with one thing they think they have as a problem, but we uncover much more. So it can become challenging, but it's a good work at the end of it. So that's my journey so far. Yes. And of course, I'm continuing to learn myself. There are always things that I would like to learn more about and develop within myself as an individual and as a professional as well. So there is always something to learn and something to discover, because there are so many different approaches to very different things. So it's a continuous journey, learning and self-discovery for myself. Yeah.
And it's our journey, isn't it? Because the different techniques that you've learned, they support us through things that we may have gone through. And I think if something can help me, it's going to be able to help others as well. Maybe not everybody, because we have to find what is right for us. But I know in my own process, I started with psychotherapy because I wished to understand what had gone on and why it had affected me and why I'd been the way I'd been. So I think it can be the mindset as well of people coming into seeking support. How open are you to answering the questions and delving deeper into yourself?
Well, a lot of people usually come to psychotherapy focusing on their cognitive functioning, and that's where we start. And we can do CBT, we can do transactional analysis, a little bit of psychodynamic interventions, and again, it's how ready people are, isn't it? Because I work with trauma, I have to be careful as well, because sometimes people would want to work on trauma, but they don't necessarily know what it means. Sometimes their bodies are not ready, or maybe they're not ready in the way that it needs to be ready. So it can be a slower process than maybe they originally wanted to. So I'll have to be careful with that. And of course, for myself as a professional, we'll have to go through supervision and look at different points of our work with clients. And of course, through the process, we discover blind spots of ourselves and the difficulties that sometimes we might wish to avoid. But that's the usual human reaction to something painful or difficult. So the clients do that too. So we're only humans, we're all humans. But that's why it's important to have right supervisor, and that's why we work one-to-one. And if need be, we work in peer support groups with the supervisor managing it all. And that's good as well, because we end up maybe in the groups where people practice different approaches. So it opens up the perspective slightly differently. So it is a process. There is always a process for psychotherapists, yeah.
But you've gone further than, I don't mean this sort of, than just psychotherapy, because you've taken it so that you've added another level to what you do.
In what way? What do you mean?
Well, you talk about the fact that you work with the mind and the body.
Okay.
So you're doing something more than just working. And I know before we were talking about sort of, you were saying that you'd learned about the chakras, and now you've taken that learning a little bit further, because I know certainly with two of the chakras, they are the solar plexus and the sacral plexus. They are actually part of your physical system. The plexus are part of your body system within anatomy and physiology. So you're working with the body as well as the mind.
Yes, I do. So my original training was mainly focused on mind-centered therapies. And then I just felt there was something missing for me, because as therapists as well, we choose trainings based on our personalities, and personalities involve different layers. Some of it is upbringing, some of it is genetic, some of it is if you believe in astrology, whenever we were born. So it takes different layers how you want to look at it. So the reason I picked my original training, integrative training, is because it had different schools. And I like the idea of looking at different things. I wouldn't be able to practice in one particular school, but that's my personality. I like to see things from different perspectives. But even there, although I enjoyed it, I felt something was missing. I just couldn't necessarily work out what it was. So I had to step back, and I just did my progression in my work. At that point, I was in social services, but I was unqualified, but I became qualified. And then I was like, oh, I need to go back to my therapy. I really liked that one, but I just needed to focus on what I wanted to do. And I wanted to focus on trauma and learn about the body. And and I think that was important for me. So that's how I picked my last training in psychotherapy. But that missing part was incredibly important for me. And the reason it was important for me, I think it's probably for many reasons, but one of them is because I did, when I was younger, I did professional swimming. So you have to be aware of the body very well. So when you're training, prior to that, I did gymnastics. So, you're constantly aware of the body. So that was my biggest missing piece. It's very difficult, I suppose, for me in general to function without that awareness, understanding. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect, I suppose, is how traditionally at home, when I was born and brought up in the Soviet Union, so how originally our doctors work, and our doctors look at the person holistically. So when you go to the doctor, as much as possible, they will look, and they can look holistically at the problem rather than at one particular aspect of the body. So that's how my holistic approach developed. So it does make sense to me to look not only at psychological difficulties, but look at what goes on in the environment on a physical level. Is there too much noise, or you're not sleeping very well, or if we're looking at spiritual aspect, what happens, what is important to you in terms of your values and things like that. So so holistic approach makes sense to me, and mind-body connection makes sense to me. And when I started practicing in terms of incorporating the body in therapy, I could notice a big shift in work. Yes, of course, it needs to be carefully tailored towards each individual. It just, for some people, it's much harder to connect with their bodies, and culturally, some people are less prepared than others, I would say. But when that connection happens, the healing happens faster, and it's much longer lived, and people actually start taking more joy in life and understand themselves better. So I really enjoy that work. Yes, so I like that mind-body interconnection. The reason I leave spirituality aside from it is because not everyone is spiritual. I would say I haven't been spiritual until very recently. It has been a journey, I have to say. But mind-body interconnection it's so important, even if cognitively people are not interested or not willing. That connection, when it's broken and it's not serving very well. So it's quite important, but again, it can't be forced. It's whenever people are ready. So some people are not, and as I said, we work on the level of cognition. And when people become more aware of certain things and things start getting better and whatever, they do usually want to go deeper, and that's when the body becomes useful. Because the body, even if we look from the yoga perspective, when we pay attention to the body and connect with it, it gives us more awareness of ourselves in terms of our emotions and where we are, what's happening to us, and then we can understand more. Yeah.
So can you, I'm not asking you to sort of give a case study or anything else, but can you give sort of an example where the body is actually the greater guide to hopefully then get you to that mind connection with the body? So how would you start with the body?
Well, the body, I don't know if it's going to be an example, but sorry, in terms of our emotions, we all have the same set emotions regardless of the cultures, right? So certain emotions are set, but sometimes people are so disconnected from their bodies, they cannot identify what their emotions are. And that can be tricky in terms of the processing and understanding, identifying what works for us, what doesn't, what we like, what we don't like, what we accept, what we don't accept. And we need those things in order to set the boundaries. They're incredibly important in terms of functioning, healthy functioning in life. So yes, so identifying emotions, that happens through the body. But we need to work out how it feels, what the sensations are in the body, what could they be saying, what are they doing, what could it possibly mean, and of course working with that in terms of the processing of the emotions that could be difficult. Some people tend to talk about emotions, some of them as negative, but actually all the emotions are needed for us to function healthily in life, and it just they can be considered difficult or challenging if they have been there for too long or they're not relevant to the actual problem in the moment. Like, for example, the anger comes up, but it's not relevant to the current moment, it comes from the past, or our anger is bigger than it needs to be for the given moment, so that means most likely it's coming somewhat from the past, or proportion of it. But all emotions they're all serving us good, and those come from our bodies. And the other example, I don't know if it's good enough or not, is when our mind might be thinking that we're not stressed, but actually if we haven't had enough water and we're dehydrated, our body starts functioning differently, and actually it's our body that tells us that we're stressed. But we need to accept that the body is incredibly wise, and when it comes to basic functioning, is actually wiser than our mind. And in terms of the way our mind develops, it's just younger than our body. It's just important to pay attention to our body and what it's telling us. So it's not just the mind, as I said. Yeah.
Oh no, the mind can be a great big culprit, but it's not the only thing. No, I'm thinking about, because of the work and the understanding I have, it's sort of thinking about, obviously, if somebody's got a real problem with their shoulders, actually it can be about what weight are you carrying, not physical weight, but if you like, emotional weight, or are you carrying other people's stuff rather than your own stuff? So it's, you're right, your body absolutely speaks to us if we are but capable of understanding. And I know you briefly mentioned spiritual, but you know, the people have found that they've actually got a problem with their back because in a previous life a spear has been stuck in it, and it's a sort of a memory from a previous life, which people might be a little bit freaked out by. But on the other hand, it depends whether you believe in the fact that we have multiple lives, and some of us are very open to that, and I know some aren't. But so our body can speak to us, and not everything that we hold is actually ours, is it? It can be to do with other people.
Yes, that's why it's important to learn about our bodies, especially around emotions that come up. So that way, if we learn about ourselves first, then we know when we're communicating to someone else or with someone else, we can quicker identify what is ours and what is not ours, and therefore we can take better actions or better decisions based on that. So that depends on many different things as well. But yes, it's good to know what is ours and what is not. It's so useful in life, definitely, especially for the people who work, especially in caring professions. So it could be, I don't know, there are so many, isn't it? Like in medical, nurses, let's say doctors, so it could be in social care, social work, or it could be even in teaching, nurseries and so forth. So it's good to know what is ours, what is not, definitely. Yeah.
So if people were to come to you for, and I'm guessing it's not a one session fix all, because most of these things aren't, everything takes time, and it's accepting the fact that for these type of things, there isn't a wonder pill that sort of you can take and it's gone. One of the most important things is that we participate in our own journey towards a wholeness, a healing, whatever you want to refer to it. But how would you typically start with somebody that comes to you?
Well, I usually do an assessment, which might take 1 or 2 sessions, depends really. So it has sets of questions around various things, like health, profession they're currently in, if they had therapy before or not, if they're on any medication or not. So, it does have a lot of things around overall well-being, holistic well-being, as well as the risks. That's where I start, and that gives me a better picture, better understanding what is what. It's very difficult to say beyond that, because as I said, some people come without any experience of therapy, so I'll have to explain to them what to possibly expect. And some people will say, oh, I've had therapy, and of course something worked, something didn't work. So it's important to establish what worked, what didn't work. So again, it's around managing expectations. But what I do say to people, well, first of all, we need to decide what they're looking for, isn't it? And sometimes that could be to do with their personalities as well. So some people are fine with intensive therapy that I do, which is 2 hours for 6 weeks, 6 days in a row. So we end up with good 12 sessions, something that people usually in traditional therapy cover in 3 months. But it's very intensive, and people need to be ready for it. Mm-hmm. And some people would like weekly therapy, once a week meeting, and that's fine too. But in either way, I do reviews all the time. So if it's weekly therapy, I do roughly every 6 weeks review of where we are in terms of what learning has taken part in those 6 weeks, what worked, what didn't work, what was useful, what wasn't useful. Because as we work together, I discover more about them, they discover more about themselves and about me as well and my way of working, and we have to, review what is what. Because as I said, sometimes people will enter therapy saying, oh, I'm ready for therapy, but actually throughout the process they might say, well, actually I'm not ready to look at my relationship with my parents that much yet. We've learned what we've learned, but I'm not ready to go deeper. Okay, that's fine. What do we want to refocus on? So, so maybe instead of going through psychotherapy route, we go something like counseling or something that is useful to them in the moment until they're ready, if they are ready. Sometimes people need break. They come back, whatever. So in intensive therapy, we do 2 hours every day, and then the next time I meet the person, which means the next day, I will ask them how the other 2 sessions have been, 2 hours have been, what it was for them. So that's my way of reviewing, but it's incredibly important for me, because I have to make sure that the client is safe and we're moving in the right direction. And it's important for the client to know that they are moving towards where they want to be moving to. As well, in that process, some people learn to speak up more or articulate themselves more about their needs, their wants, and so forth, which maybe some have been struggling in the past. So it's a useful process on many levels. So these are just the basic ones that I'm covering in explaining that. So that's the basics that I can give for now. But it's a process. Although I've been doing it for a long time, the clients still surprise me every time, because there is always another layer of something that maybe I haven't come across or I haven't considered, or it's a process.
It can really be a learning curve working with people. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. I suppose, thinking about it, for many, because you're asking them the questions, you're helping them to find their voice. And how many of us, because of the things that have gone on in our lives, have struggled to actually realize we've got a voice. And I suppose that's one of the places to even start, is helping people to realize that they have a voice.
Well, it's different for different people. I think maybe some people think they have a voice, but they maybe don't necessarily know how to use it fully, let's say. Like they can speak about different things openly and whatever, but maybe they haven't used it to speak about their internal world, like about those emotions. Well, before they can speak about it, we need to go through the process of identifying them, or how does it feel in the body, what does it do, and things like that. And once it become easier, they become enthusiastic and positive about the benefits of all those emotions, not just so-called negative ones. They take interest usually, and they participate, and they enjoy using their voice in different ways. But and for some people it could be having problems with that part of the chakra, isn't it? This part, and sometimes people will end up with, unfortunately, some related difficulties like thyroid glands. Yes, so speaking in therapy can be helpful, and of course doing some exercises from yoga maybe could be helpful as well. So there are different ways that we can look at to help.
Excellent. Right, something was going through my head and it's gone again now.
It's okay. It will come back.
Well, it'll come back, or something else will come. So you're working with people, and you talk very much about trauma, but also because you're talking about sort of the well-being of helpers and high achievers, and so many people go into anxiety. So do they come knowing that they're in that place of anxiety, or is it just that they're not well and it's helping them understand? And do you work any differently when it's about anxiety rather than trauma?
Well, anxiety can be caused by different aspects of our lives. So it could be that people take some kind of medication that can give side effects of anxiety. It could be that actually some people's diet is quite poor for whatever reason, not deliberately poor, but for example, if let's say someone is vegetarian, then they don't have enough iron in their body, and without it, unfortunately, without enough iron, some anxiety can pop up. Similar problem could be vitamin D. If people don't have enough vitamin D in their bodies, that could lead to similar problems as well. So we need to look at things more holistically. Well, I do as much as I can, although I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a doctor, but I can only share my knowledge with people and say, well, it might be beneficial for you to maybe do the blood test to identify, to rule out the physical problem. Because, we can do as much therapy as we can, but if our body is not having enough right vitamins, therapy is not going to take in the right direction. It's not going to be positive enough. If anything, people might end up saying, well, it has been negative, it hasn't done anything to me or whatever. So the body is fundamental, really. Again, if people are not having enough water in their body, again, that can cause stress and anxiety. So that needs to be considered. And sometimes things can be quite easy, like people will say, well, it's summer, surely I get vitamin D. Well, it depends what job you do. If your job is work office based, and you're in the office whilst the sun is out, you're not going to be getting vitamin D, right? So and summer is much shorter than the rest of the year, again, depending on which country you're based. If you're based in Britain, where the sun is not something that is a norm, having sun during summertime is just not enough for the body to function on it throughout the year. And when people are stressed, again, and if that stress is not managed, whatever it is, it's either too much psychological pressure or, again, not enough vitamins in the body. And when this stress is not managed, it does go into anxiety. And then if anxiety is not managed, it tends to go to burnout. So that's couple of ways, or 3 ways. The side effects from medication, what we have enough or not in the body, and obviously if it's not managed, goes anxiety and burnout. The other way is, of course, trauma, and trauma takes different parts. It could be one big one-off, it could be continuous, it could be a little bit in childhood, a little bit in adulthood. So, we have to look into it. But it could be a combination of it, because trauma is an interesting thing anyway. Some people think trauma has to be something like really traumatic, like a car accident or a big loss of something or someone. But that's not necessarily the case. It can take different forms. It doesn't have to be deliberate trauma, For example, children don't have to be deliberately abused in any shape or form, but they can take something as traumatic based on different things and carry through their lives on unconscious level. So so it's a combination of things. So it could be a lifestyle, adulthood lifestyle. Let's say childhood was relatively good enough, but adulthood lifestyle somehow became very very busy. Let's say that could be the case for high achievers. They're constantly studying or constantly working and not having enough rest, not having enough balance in their lives to look after themselves and recharge themselves. So that can lead to anxiety. And people do come with anxiety. Sometimes they will call it anxiety, yes, that's right. But sometimes people will come and say, oh, I'm lately having lots of arguments and I don't understand where it's coming from. So depends. Yes, and a lot of this behavior can be traced down to childhood, but sometimes not. But then again, it's how long time we have got to look into things, isn't it? Sometimes people are not ready to share whatever, or they're not aware that they need to share it. I mean, they're just so focused on, oh, I have the problem now, and maybe it arose, I don't know, a week ago, so definitely not childhood. So it depends where people are at and what we have. So we work with what we have. So it's difficult to separate sometimes, but we start with where we can, and we, as a therapist, I need to be careful to not go too deep too fast. So I need to know what the client is ready for. Is it psychotherapy or is it counseling? As I said, sometimes people say, oh yeah, I'm ready for anything. But actually later they will realize and actually voice it, but not everyone is ready to voice. So I need to be checking with them, like, where are we at? Yeah, so everyone is different. So I need to be careful, like if I know the person is able to voice something, I will ask, or they will say themselves. But if I know the person is not so great at stating something, we just work on preparing everything for if the person is ready to go deeper. Yeah, I hope it answers the question.
But I think it's really important and sort of, I know the work I do is very different, but it's that knowing when to stop, knowing when not to push somebody beyond, because actually it just can make things worse. Trauma, and I know I was saying this before, to a child, one word, one look can be traumatic. It's don't judge what is traumatic to another person. What you may be able to deal with, or you think you can deal with, is one thing, but what somebody else can deal with may be way more than you can, or way less than you can. It depends what's gone on in our early years and what we've experienced, what we've witnessed, because it's not just about our experience, it's the experience of what we've witnessed, isn't it? What we've seen, what we've heard. And it's usually within the family home. It might be school, and our peers that haven't been very nice to us. Could be teachers, it could be aunts, uncles, parents, it could be anything that can go on with people. And what's happened in our past can be triggered by something that happens in our today.
Definitely, yeah. And it's for all of us. Life does bring traumas, but we might not want to call them traumas. But if it has long-lasting negative effect on us, it can be considered as trauma. But as I said, some people are not ready to call it that way. But unfortunately, we all have to, not have to, but we all deal with unpleasant situations and difficult, challenging times. And some of it can be traumatic. But sometimes we don't realize in the moment it's traumatic. Sometimes after a while we think, gosh, that was traumatic. But we all go through this, whether we like it or not. But how we cope with it depends on many different things. But we all go through trauma. It's just that we don't always want to call it trauma, and that's fine. We don't have to. We can call it challenging times. We can call it difficult times, as long as we process it and help the body to get rid of it, so it doesn't catch up on us in the later times. So that's what is useful. But yeah, it can be tricky. It takes a while sometimes to realize what did happen actually could be considered as trauma, because I'm still carrying it. In whatever ways, but it's not that easy.
But we can work through it, but we usually tend to have support to do that. It's not something that very many people can actually do for themselves, and being able, I think I've got to the stage with my own story, I can tell it, and as traumatic as it genuinely was, I can almost tell it with a smile, because, and not that it's smile stuff, but because it no longer holds any power over me. But it's also realizing, isn't it, that we think we've dealt with something until something else crops up and we realize there's another layer. And that's why we tend to refer to the onion. It's another layer of the onion. A really good analogy, because it definitely can lead to tears at times. And that doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. Some things can really emotionally, and you've talked about the emotions, affect us. This has been really interesting. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to add before we close?
Just to mention maybe that it's okay for all of us to look after ourselves in whatever way we can. We can do so many different things. We can go for the massage, we can go for the spiritual healer, we can go for counseling, psychotherapy, but it's important to do that, especially if we're struggling and we don't know why we're struggling. It's okay to ask for help. And I just know that because as therapists, we have to go through our own therapy whilst we're training, and it has been a useful journey, even though I didn't think there was much to work through, but I still managed to work through things that made my life easy. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, spirituality entered my life without warning. So I needed to work with someone who understands more in that area than I do. I have some understanding, but I'm not an expert in spirituality. So I had to go to the expert in that area. And it's okay, we'll have different expertise in our lives. Someone has financial expertise, someone has got emotional expertise, someone has got spiritual expertise. But the main point is to start somewhere. And if you don't have enough in one area, then you can move on to another area. But it's a journey that can be enjoyable, even though we started at the time when it's difficult. But I'm encouraging everyone to enjoy the journey.
And I think when you come through it the other side, it's really worth it, even if it doesn't feel it at times. folks, Olga, thank you so much. I've just popped your website address into the chat. That's olga-therapy.com. So if you are watching this, the replay on YouTube, you'll find that underneath the information, sort of below the video. So please, if there's anything here that has touched you, has spoken to you, and you want to find out more about Olga and her work, then please check out the website, and you can connect with her through her website. So please do that. Olga, thank you so very much for joining us today, for all the wisdom that you have shared, because I appreciate you can't go through a whole session because it's different with everybody, and that's what we all have to realize with all of these, every technique, because we are all unique people, and our experiences, our journey is different. So you've been able to speak from a generalized way of speaking, but obviously the working with the individual in front of you, then you can truly sort of delve deeper as far as they wish to go. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me and having this opportunity to share, and hopefully it will be beneficial and useful to some people. Thank you.
Thank you. Just very briefly, next week, I am being joined by Daniel John Hanneman, and he is going to be sharing Rock Your Sacred Purpose, and he works with energy scans for that. So I hope you'll think about joining us for that. In the meantime, take care, be safe, stay well. Namaste, sweet souls. Bye.